So how to have a tough conversation. So how to deal. So this is a multi-part series that I'm starting on how to deal with your Asian parents when they take care of your kids. Asian grandparents often take care of their grandchildren. It's actually a tradition that's old as time. Many of my friends and family many of my friends actually, when they were growing up, their grandparents took care of them. So this one is about having a tough conversation, but choosing the topic wisely. Picking my battles with my parents, like about how to take care of my daughter, is like an art and a science. This thing is, if I nagged them every time they did something that annoyed me, like my concerns will eventually fall on deaf ears. That's right. If someone tells you continually, don't do this, and something that you just continually do, it's really hard, right? Or it's not just the same thing, but like different things. Don't do this. Oh yeah, don't do that. Don't do this. And don't do that. Don't, like, you know. Generally, Asian parents are very sensitive to criticism. They're probably like, a lot of them actually were criticism is just really hard for a lot of people to take, because often when feedback is given, they'll immediately just start getting defensive, and then they'll play the victim or shift the blame on something or someone else. Like it was the so-and-so or this that happened, not me, right? So it's a delicate art to bring up when it comes to how to take care of my daughter. And they take it as criticizing their caretaking abilities, and they'll take it as, well, it's easy for them to be defensive because they raised you. So they'll be like, well, I did a good job with you, so why are you criticizing me, right? Like, what's wrong with you? So bottom line is choosing the right issue to bring up, right? Knowing what I value and whether the issue is big and frequent enough to pinch my values, right? Like, you have to really think about yourself and know yourself of why is it something really bothering you. So there are two things. I'm going to go through two stories that happened to me, and I decided to bring it up. So figuring out what I have control over. So like I have like as mentioned in a previous episode, I have a very low bar on what I expect from my parents, right? But there was my two things was, okay, keep my kids safe, full and clean, and then the second thing is speak Cantonese to them. But there was a recurring issue that kept happening every time our daughter came home. It started happening as she got older. She was having way too many of those Ritz cheese crackers, the cheese sandwiches, the little things, goldfish crackers and bear paws, and just a bunch of junk. So much of my parents that she had no appetite for dinner. So by the time she came home, she was like, I don't want dinner. It was starting to take over her real meals, and I had to put my foot down. I was like, this is not good. So I had to have a conversation with my mom, and I explained to her that when she eats too much junk at their place, she's not hungry at dinner time, right? And, then right before bed, she'll say, I can't sleep because I'm hungry. And then I'll have to reheat her dinner. And so what I told my mom, and I mean, as mentioned many times before, my mom very much values her health. And so I kind of remind her that, she can eat some snacks and stuff like that, but it's not very good for really anyone to be having all their calories, made up of snacks. So that she kind of understood. And then I kind of reiterated, then I reminded her of when we were kids and we didn't want to eat dinner at that certain time. We wanted her to, and then after hours after she's already cleaned up, wiped the tables clean, packed everything in the fridge, and we decide, we want to eat, she's going to be like, it's very frustrating. It's an inconvenience for the parents to do that. And so she's like, okay, I get it. Okay. And so I asked Mom, could you please feed her better snacks, And then she's like, well, what? And I'm like, I don't like fruit or yogurt, and maybe like a peanut butter sandwich. And then she tells me, well, it won't work because your daughter already knows that there are snacks in my house. It's there. So she's going to ask for that. She's not going to want to eat, an orange. She eats a lot of fruit already at my parents. But anyway, I empathized. So I empathized with my mom. And I said, you know what? I know my parents. My parents like snacks themselves. And also, like, if they're eating snacks as a child and you see that, it's really hard to say no. Like, I'm eating it, but you can't. Like, so I'm like, okay. So then my mom flipped it back on me and said, okay, well, why don't you bring over what you want me to feed her, and I'll feed her that. And I'm like, well, if I do that, what's the difference between you having healthier things at your house? If I packed her snacks and lunch and everything, she's going to still have access. She's still going to have access to the junk, and she's going to want it. But then her question got me thinking, you know what I mean? And I started thinking about, like, what if I brought over something that was filling enough and tasty and healthy that she doesn't eat too much of the processed junk? Because eventually she will still have access to it, but she'll be a little bit full, and it's something that she likes. So at home, I often bake. Like, I bake regularly, 5-pack protein-rich loaves and muffins, right? They're the easiest thing you can make. Like really old bananas, carrots, canned pumpkin when it's on sale, frozen blueberries that I've had in my freezer for a year. And I'll make them. And my daughter loves eating the muffins and loaves. She eats them all like a dessert. And in my recipes, I add flax and chia, and I use half the sugar because often the fruit is quite sweet already. So I was like, you know what? How about I double up the recipe and gives the extra bit to my parents so that when she's at their house, she can also have that. So I started doing that. If it's a loaf, I'll pre-slice the loaf and put it into a container so it's all portioned out for my daughter. And so far it's been working. Like, every time I go pick my daughter up, I'll ask my daughter, did you have a muffin today? And she'll be like, yes. Like, even though I don't know how much, like, other junk she ate, right? Like, which is another tip I'll talk about later. At least I know some of her calories came from something nutritious that I made. And it gives me a sense of reassurance that there's, like, a little bit of control over something, right? So that's the first kind of thing. You got to, like, figure out what you have control over and what you don't. And if you don't have too much control over something, or it's just really hard, then coming up with a creative solution is the way to go, or something that at least it's managing your own expectations. Conversation not lost in translation. So I mentioned this earlier in another episode. A while back, my parents started taking her to Strong Start. It's a program I don't know if it's across British Columbia or BC, but for sure Greater Vancouver. It's a program run by the school district that is free, which is amazing, for kids under the age of 5, as long as they're accompanied by a guardian or an adult. And they started going, and the facilitator noticed that my daughter didn't know English, right? And she only spoke Cantonese, and she couldn't understand the instructions when the facilitator was telling them to clean up. It's time to clean up. Time to go on the floor. We're going to start singing songs. Like, she didn't understand a lot of that stuff. And so when it was time to leave, the facilitator came up to my dad and told him that, my daughter needs to learn English. And that there were kids who were completely fluent in both languages. And she'll fall behind when she starts kindergarten if she doesn't start to learn now. So my dad, he starts to worry, he starts to get anxious, and he starts to get scared for my daughter not fitting in and, being left behind when she starts kindergarten. Like, he's worried that she's going to experience that pain. He doesn't want her to feel left out or feel like she doesn't fit in with everyone else. He has the people-pleasing gene. He values conformity. He likes to follow the rules, and he doesn't like to stick out like a sore thumb, right? And of course, like the stereotypical Asian parent, he's has a comparing mentality of like, well, she's like this and others are like that. She needs to improve, like which one's better, which one's worse, right? The side note, thank goodness, I inherited my mom's need for individuality and the rule-breaking gene from my mom. I still remember the time when my mom was teaching me how to drive as a teenager. She told me you can drive 10 kilometers above the speed limit, just don't get caught, Okay. Anyway, so from that day forward, after the facilitator had the conversation with him, he started reading and speaking English to my daughter. And I didn't even know. Like, I had to find this out from my mom. And so I had to have a tough conversation with my dad because he's breaking like the only two things you have to do, and he's already not doing the second thing, which is speak Cantonese to my daughter. Basically, I told him that the instructor, so I met her one time when I took my daughter to Strong Start, she's old school, okay? And besides, like, I assured my dad that English is like me and my husband's preferred language, okay? We speak, we dream, we think in English. Like, if you can tell by the way I speak, I'm so fluent in English. It's that's how I live and breathe. And like, if you just watch me right now, like, I don't think I have an accent. I don't have an accent. I mean, I can do other accents if I want, or attempt to do British accents. And even when I appeared on Fairchild TV News, I had to speak English. It's just like my Cantonese is just not at all the level that I am in English. So I explained to my dad that English is going to be very easy for my daughter to learn. Once she starts school, she'll pick it up within a few weeks. Like, we have friends whose kids only spoke Cantonese at home until they were 5, and then they started kindergarten, and basically all the conversations at home turned to English. And we have that expectation, is that when she does go to school, English is just going to start to take over. But my husband and I really want our daughter to be exposed to and to learn as much Cantonese, and that be able to have the tones, speak the tones and listen to the tones correctly before then. And then lastly, I reminded my dad that, like, hey, this is what your own daughters went through, right? Like, me and my sisters all spoke Cantonese at home until we started school. And like, look at us now, man. Like, look at us now. Like, you think we're going to struggle? We feel like, yeah, it was a bit of a struggle to kind of transition from Cantonese to English. But like, together, like, my sister and I, we have more degrees than we can count on one hand. And plus, come on, it's like, I had to learn what the Chinese words for COVID is for my daughter. Anyway, lastly, I remind my dad, is like, the added benefit of our daughter speaking and understanding Cantonese is her ability to converse with her grandparents. Like, my parents, it makes them so much more comfortable being able to freely express their thoughts, stories, and opinions, feelings, without having to translate in their head, right? Like, because as people age, and this is like scientifically shown, as old people get older, they start to revert back to their native language. And so for my parents to be Cantonese. And as they get older, it's going to be harder for them to translate to English to converse and have serious, deep conversations with my kids. You know, like, my dad, like, I basically reminded him that, you know, isn't it nice talking to your daughter in Cantonese without just freely being to say whatever the hell you want, without having to think of it in English first. And then lastly, I told my dad, I'm hoping that because she has a basic understanding of the Chinese language, that, like, by the time I enroll her in Chinese school, when she gets to the right age, like, she's not going to be completely blindsided, right? It's not going to be a completely foreign language for her. And that because she has that interest to continue conversing with my parents, that she'll have an interest in learning more about it, like, not just the speaking part, but the writing part and the reading part. And so I share these with my dad, like, all these points, and just kind of just like totally laying it out and finding ways to make it resonate with him, right? Like, sharing it in a way that resonates with him. Since then, he hasn't attempted to teach my daughter English, okay? At least not that I know of. So let me know, like, what are some tough conversations you've had with your parents about things that they've done with your kids, or just generally things that you think you don't want your parents to do when you have kids. Let me know.